So yeah, welcome everyone to today's presentation, Construction Timelining, Navisworks versus Twinmotion. Rich and I actually did a very similar presentation or on the same topic about a year ago. And when setting this up and revisiting it, we didn't want to just regurgitate the same presentation over again. Not too much has changed between what we really want to show here. We're just approaching it in a different way. And I've got a case study that I can show, or that I will show at the end. And Rich has some additional information he's going to share. But in terms of the formalities of this, we're going to make it more of a conversation between Rich and myself, kind of wearing different hats or taking different roles within this process. So hopefully this comes across really well. And feel free, guys, ask questions in the Q&A. We'll be more than happy to address your questions at the end, and I'm sure there will be some really good ones because this is a pretty loaded subject. So as Laurie mentioned, just go quickly through this. My name is Vince Daniele. I'm our construction team manager for our Building Solutions division, and with me is Rich Creveling. He's on my team as a solutions consultant. He's the mad scientist behind all of the data, which you guys will see once he starts showing his stuff in Assemble and Navisworks. Rich, I don't know if you want to just do a quick little intro for yourself or say hi to everyone.
Hello, Rich Creveling, pleased to be with you today. Construction professional with about 35 years of experience in commercial, gravitated towards technology in the late 90s. So,
thanks, Rich. Okay, so the point of focus for the presentation is construction timelining. And the way that we approached this in our previous presentation and the way that we're approaching it again is really thinking about construction timelining in two different use cases. So two different options, I called them. So one, what is the goal? What are we trying to achieve with the construction plan or the 4D simulation, the construction timeline? Option one, and this is the part that Rich is going to demonstrate and show how he did this with real data, breaking models down, conditioning them, pushing them to a schedule, and so on. Option one is to produce an accurate timeline of the construction plan. So maybe less on the visual appeal, but more of a, we won't call it a rigid timeline, but a proposed timeline to view that information up front. And then option two is the part that I will cover, creating more of a visually appealing representation of that construction plan or construction timeline with more of a purpose to communicate the idea of the proposed construction plan to stakeholders in the project. So something that just communicates to them, this is how the building will go together, different changes and conditions, potentially weather, calendar impacts and all of that stuff, but more of a sort of a marketing presentation communication tool rather than a scheduling tool. Okay. Did you want to add anything to that, Rich, today? Communicate that effectively? Okay. All right, so I will go ahead and or Laurie, do you want to pass the ball over to Rich? He's going to share his portion, his option one portion of the timeline. Thank you. All right, I've got you, Rich.
So the starting point I have here is the Autodesk hospital model. Many of you may have seen this in presentations or training, so it may be familiar to you. It has this is just the architectural model, but there is also a structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and site work in this collective sample content provided by Autodesk. So I'm going to show you ways that I have consumed this model on my way towards having a simulation. I'll add for context that Vince picked up on the notion of the construction plan, and project schedules start out as a plan. I subscribe to the notion that projects really get built with a series of game time decisions on like a 3-week look ahead in order to meet that plan. So we'll be showing visualization of the plan to start with, but try to talk about some concepts for that 3-week look ahead as well. So another application by Autodesk is Assemble. That's part of the greater Autodesk Construction Cloud. And we have the ability to publish this model towards Assemble. I won't walk through that publishing process today, but you'll notice I can also sync certain changes I may make over an Assemble back. In my practice, I keep that really solely to project parameters that I would bring back in to the model. That's possible to do. So we'll start high altitude over here in Assemble. This is our IMAGINiT Assemble hub, where we store many projects. So we have a whole collection. This is the project that I'll be utilizing in presentation.
Rich, just the purpose behind pushing this to Assemble, really high level. What's the end goal here? You're taking the model from Revit, the way that it exists, the way that Revit deals with properties, parameters. You're pushing it to Assemble for what purpose?
So you'll see that I've titled this project Builder's Information Model, which is a little play on words, but the design models that we get are really a representation of what we leave behind as a builder, but really don't have the same type of codification beyond alphabetical order on text that builders typically use, like estimating phase codes or accounting cost codes or scheduling activity IDs. The codes and descriptions in a builder's world, whereas in an architect's world, not quite as prevalent. We can also get really good quantity analysis out of Assemble, but that's not the primary purpose that I'll be illustrating. So I'm loading up a model that's been, it has attribution on it that presents it as per my plan of tackling this configuration here. And one thing that was interesting in this is that the floor slabs on the first 3 floors were all one slab around the entire building with a couple holes punched in it. But that's not how I'm going to build those slabs. I'll point out that if I wanted to, with Assemble, we can really get a higher level of control over what we're going to visualize than what you can get in visibility graphics overrides in Revit, if that makes any sense to you. So another part of the purpose of getting to Assemble is it does not require a Revit application, nor does it require a model author's level of skill set. Assemble is really lightweight and easy to learn. If I add a rule here that says with type name equal to, and we'll go to categories equal to floor. So there was 2 rules there, and trying to isolate a floor here that'll enable me to show how I split those. But I'm going to highlight an element here, and I need to move this out of the way. So with that element selected, we're going to be able to review additional property information that I assigned to that element. I've got division 4, a buyout package that I want to communicate with my contracting pool is the masonry package, CSI spec number, a full collection of uniformat that I can group and sort and filter by. But as well, I get down to schedule sequence, schedule detail that I'm using in my my schedule tasks that you can see manifested there. I can also, like with project parameters, identify PSI of concrete, pounds per cubic yard of reinforcing. There are some things that I could populate down here specific to a scheduling workflow, like I queue up just an automated date or a duration in there. And here's where I'm providing the attribution that's giving me the colorization in here. I'm from there able to mine a lot of data from this using a tool called Assemble Connect. This is where I was able to mine and combine my schedule activity codes, inclusive of what I would use as project activity coding in a P6 context or utilize in text fields in Microsoft Project. Now, we're marching towards looking at Navisworks. And in Navisworks, I'm utilizing a feature that saves a lot of staying up late, clicking on elements and linking them. So I'm going to generate scheduled tasks from that content. I've provided my logic, really kept the durations the same for the sake of presentation. Now the silver bullet is that I've created XML selection set import files that I can import into Navisworks using a selection set naming that's consistent with the task or activity ID. So this selection set is going to bundle up these instance IDs within the model. Okay.
And Rich, how did you generate this portion?
I again extracted the tasks and their instances, and I had to run this through a script that generates the XML syntax. Now, this XML syntax is simply what exports from Navisworks. All I did was reverse engineer what exports as far as XML from Navisworks, and recreating that syntax, I was able to then import as opposed to creating those manually. Now I'm going to bounce over to Navisworks quickly, where I have the same multidiscipline model. If I go all the way to the end, everything's in there. I'll back up. I can see my, I've gone into sets and manage sets to get this dialog open. This is where I was able to import that XML file. And on tasks, same syntax of text is showing up here. And there are auto attach rules that know to link up selection sets with the scheduled tasks of the same name. So having done that, if I come back to simulate, I'll go back to the beginning. Using my attribution and how I farmed things out data-wise, there are 1,400 selection sets and 1,400 tasks. And I'll pull the trigger and begin the simulation. And you'll be able to see how I'm approaching this structure in sections. I'm going to get the building spine going first because the MEP is heavy up in here. Now, without that methodology, I would have had to manually create about 1,400 selection sets and manually link those to tasks. And I was commenting to Vince that my experience suggests that doing that manually well, that's 2 or 3 weeks worth of work to really get that produced. And there can be some starting and stopping, having to do things over again if you don't digest the model first. That may be the most important thing I can offer about what I do in Assemble is I really learn the model content. I know what's in there, I know what's not, I know what's mocked up, I know what's redundant, like floor slabs that exist in both an architectural model and a structural model. Well, I don't want to schedule them or estimate them twice. So with Assemble, I'm able to walk into this guy here. So this starts to speak to 3-week look ahead type things that you can zero in on while the project's going on. You could examine coordination during construction. A lot of these technologies really emerged in the refinery business. Bechtel had, some people that worked for Bechtel had a lot to do with bringing these types of technologies in. And when you can combine both the collision detection and the scheduling and animation in Navisworks, you can get some really powerful visualizations of setting tanks and vessels and whatnot to ensure you don't obstruct yourself within the construction process.
Hey, Rich, while you're showing that, David asked a question in the chat. How do you deal with model elements that are associated to multiple scheduled tasks?
That's a good question. I've got, if we looked into this, I do have a level of detail in my schedule that includes, let's see, form, reinforce, place, finish. And so I'm able to, with cost estimating type support, I'm able to get to that finer level of detail. And if you have two tasks, you can link it to that same spread footing element. It'll just turn on twice. The same can be true for, say, a brick veneer on metal stud wall with chipboard on the inside. I don't think that wall just kind of turns on once. There's multiple tasks with multiple trades. To get to that finer level of detail, I can run the same model through some 5D estimating that maintains that the instance IDs that I was showing in this file, I never lose those. And that's really what the collection set utilizes to make the joins, is the instance IDs, is ultimately what makes the grab.
And Rich, are those numbers, those are being produced from how you're conditioning the model in Assemble?
No, those numbers are inherent to the Revit instance IDs. If I come back to Assemble and I drill down to the lowest level, that's a Revit instance ID within a category, family, and type name.
So I guess you were going to show this with the slab.
I'm adding this attribution here.
Right. But let's say in an instance of a Revit element ID, like the slab you were getting at earlier, I don't think you were able to isolate it. But say that slab spans the entire foundation of the building, but you want to break it up into six different segments. Are you able to do that in Assemble, to condition that single element to break it down into 6 different parts or different pieces? Or would that require going back into Revit to do an update and sync back to Assemble?
My method is the latter. I call that elective surgery. And I wouldn't do that to a copy of the model that is going to be utilized for fabrication or document production. I would save a copy of that. Designers typically, they're not looking for extra work, and contractors really are responsible for the means and methods. So there are times where, to fulfill my intent for visualization, again, I take a little creative license and do a little elective surgery to break up models. So let me go to this category sort here, and I didn't do a very good job of working with the visibility rules here. Let me go to structure. And maybe what I should do is close here and only show so I've selected a segment of that slab that I took responsibility for slicing it, because I want to be able to make that pour, and I want to be able to make that pour, and I want to be able to make that pour, so on and so forth. Whereas these were really full contiguous one-piece elements per floor when I received the model. And that's what I would anticipate from the designer, unless it's a serious design build sort of thing. They're going to gravitate towards what's required for their own work product and I'm taking a little liberty with their work product to get what I desire out of mine. And we'll look at the assemble properties again, where this is my construction intelligence. I want to, here, this goes back to the point regarding multiple schedule activities. Well, that slab is a composite that has deck and it has concrete material. I'm gravitating towards the most impactful, differentiable codification. This is where the visualization is not a pure and exact science unless you model that way. It's intended to convey a plan. Let's speak back to this schedule here, if I may. It's important for you to understand that what goes into not just Navisworks, but Synchro or other visualization applications, the logic does not come along for the ride. All that really goes in there is the dates. And the dates are like a light switch. Turns it on, it turns it green, and then when it's done, it returns to its native shading. Again, we're making frames of a movie. So there are many times in my experience with this where I've taken a superintendent schedule and I have deduced dates that comply with the content I have to integrate it with. And I think I get a better, a visualization that communicates better and has less orphans in it. If I, again, create a schedule that matches the content that I have to work with, so I'm effectively turning on and off the content I want to turn on and off. And I just mirror the, say, the construction schedule that's hanging in the trailer. And so,
yeah, for this example, I think you did most things as a 5-day start to finish on the timeline, but
yeah, there naturally could have been a lot more sensitivity put into making that accurate, but for the sake of presentation, with this Autodesk model that I'm never going to build,
right.
an effective job of turning on and off like a light switch the elements that I want to show under construction.
And I mean, if anyone here on the call has ever had to do this via Navisworks or set one of these timelines up manually, the selection set portion is extremely time consuming, especially when you're getting a Revit model pushed into Navis and how it's creating your hierarchy within your selection tree. What Rich has done here in using Assemble to create and condition that model to push that to the XML in order to create the selection sets, but have it perfectly mirrored over to the schedule tasks. To me, that's kind of the silver bullet and time-saving technique that's being used to populate this. And obviously, there's going to be more time spent to refine that schedule to get those dates perfect. But for the sake, to proof this out, Rich, I think you've done an amazing job at demonstrating where the horsepower is within conditioning the model in Assemble, pushing that data across to Navisworks, and then matching it up here.
I'll show my cards that here's a piece of curtain wall that turned on because it has the same instance ID as a piece of steel. Okay, so this is one of the things that I would clean up post-production, but that I was able to get an automated link to get that far. I didn't have to link any of that manually. I just imported the schedule and imported the selection sets, and there is a little runtime while it syncs those values up, but I didn't have to click on doors at 3 in the morning. And that ends up, it can be very laborious to create one of these without that type of support. Again, any simulation tool that you would use typically have, look through the help file or ask the representative, what are the methods that you can use to get some kind of automatic linking. So Vince, how about if we pass this over to you? I'm willing to take some more questions if anybody has any at this time.
Cool.
Passing it to Lori, so Lori can pass that to you.
I think I've got it. Yeah, I'm showing my screen here, so we are good. Anyway, Lori, you took it back. There we go. I got it again. All right, thank you. So, yeah, thanks, Rich. So obviously with option 1, you're really getting into the element detail, and you have the control over really assigning things to a granular level of schedule within the timeline. And as Rich mentioned, maybe this isn't exactly the schedule that the superintendent is going to be actually building off of, but prior to construction, or to do that 3-week look ahead, kind of track the schedule, see if you're on task. That visualization tool, I think, is extremely powerful, and it does communicate the idea of where we need to be in the construction timeline. If you had to set that up in a project the scale of the Autodesk Hospital, like Rich mentioned, staying up at 3 in the morning, clicking on doors and walls and individual elements to generate those selection sets, you're probably not going to use time within the project budget to do that. And instead, you guys will be in, you'll look at the simple Gantt chart or the schedule from P6 or Microsoft projects. So it's just another layer. All of these tools and what I'm about to show, Rich and I have had many conversations about this. A lot of this is really just communication. We're expressing the ideas, and we're showing it in a way that reads a lot better than looking at line items in a spreadsheet. So with that idea, to really strip down the data part of it, on the visualization side, for those of you who don't know IMAGINiT, we have a partnership with Epic Games, who produces Twinmotion. So still using Navisworks, and this is kind of a critical component to conditioning the model in terms of breaking it up the way that I want to create a visualization in Twinmotion. I'm still using selection sets, and Twinmotion has a Datasmith plugin for Navisworks to be able to take the selection sets, isolate them, and push them out individually into file imports for Twinmotion, and then create a timeline. So I have Twinmotion open. Let me just share this one. When Rich and I set this project up, I could have done the entire hospital. Like Rich said, we're not really constructing this, so we didn't want to spend weeks and weeks and weeks to create this this data set, because what we've done here, I think, expresses the idea. We took a portion, one of his areas that he had split up in Assemble, and created a timeline for this within the Twinmotion program. When we initially set this data set up, there was no Datasmith export from Navisworks, so we had to use the other method, which would be exporting FBX files. I could open up the Navisworks file and show you this, but I don't want to have too many really heavy hitting programs open on my computer at once. Just don't want to bog down the performance of my machine and potentially crash the GoToMeeting. But in this Navisworks model, the same one that Rich was showing, I was taking different portions of the building and grabbing maybe a grouping of selection sets and exporting these out as individual FBXs. So I had to do this manually. I did this 88 times, so I have 88 separate FBX imports into Twinmotion in order to create that same idea of an element timeline. So what we can see here in Twinmotion, all of these FBXs are the files that were imported in. As I mentioned, I have 88. The same naming convention that Rich created with his XML import is present here. So we name the files that way. It was easy to select them and push those out to these FBX files. So that portion, it was more repetition and just kind of busy work than heavy lifting type of work, but it was still manual. So it was easy, but it was time consuming. Once I had all of the FBX files inside of Twinmotion, let me show you this. So Twinmotion being primarily a visualization tool rather than a real robust construction tool, at least on the surface. It has a scene graph similar to Navisworks, but each one of these, again, was a line item that was coming from these FBX imports, and it creates a hierarchy within the model to isolate down to different elements. So just to show you guys here, if I isolate, say, an individual concrete floor slab, this is all coming from the breakdown from the Navisworks model. One thing that has improved upon this, because this is with the FBX export that we did for our original presentation, with the Datasmith export, we can eliminate all of these additional levels in the selection hierarchy. So getting it down to the individual element here, if I just isolate this, you know, there's that one piece. It's got what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's in the 8th level of the hierarchy that I'm able to select that individual element, which kind of creates a pretty messy scene graph hierarchy, because every single element's going to have that level of breakdown. The reason I'm mentioning this is this has improved with the Datasmith. I would potentially just have the one level of hierarchy based on the name of the export, and then all of the elements included in that export directly underneath that single folder. So once you've brought these things in, you do have the ability to control and isolate individual elements. I wanted to avoid most of that work once I got into Twinmotion. I just kind of wanted to go by, all right, we've got this FBX. That FBX contains, you know, X amount of items, which, let's show this, if I isolate the entire FBX. So here's the entire selection set that was exported from Navis in the first place. So you don't have to drill down into the element by element level, but you do have the potential or the opportunity to, if you really, really wanted to get into a detailed timeline. Instead, for the sake of this visualization, we decided let's group a few different objects together, related objects like pilings and footings, slab components for the foundation. And let's just make those one element. So maybe not, again, not as detailed as what Rich was showing, but it communicates the idea to maybe a stakeholder in the project to see what the large picture, the big picture of the construction plan looks like. So in this one, we did set up a scene of the surrounding site. I built in, I dropped down the ground plane so that we could show those foundation elements so that they're not hidden. If we really wanted to take the time, we could show the ground being excavated and, you know, foundations being poured in more detail. But I just kind of pulled the trick, dropped the ground plane down, put a new one in once the foundation's poured. But looking at the phasing timeline here in Twinmotion, each one of these line items, so we can create a phase. So each one of these is called a phase. And then we can associate each different Gantt bar here in this Gantt chart to control the visibility of items within that phase. So each one of these, technically, if I scroll down a little bit here, you can start to see the naming conventions for certain pieces. These relate directly to the FBX files that we imported in for this example. So each of these bars is sort of an isolation of the FBX that is triggered just on a rough timeline. This is not this is not a day by day type of timeline that we created for this. You can get into that granular detail going by, month and day, but I think when I put this together, I was dealing more with like weeks of construction and kind of snapping to these bars on different weeks so that it would trigger them turning on at different times. If I start to scrub this timeline, you'll see that, okay, all we're doing here, if we're looking at the scene graph, is it's turning the visibility on for these, we can call them layers or different elements. But as the scrubs, all it's doing is triggering, like Rich mentioned before, sort of that on-off sequence. So same idea, it's just a different program. It's a little bit easier, I think, to visualize and control this within Twinmotion and Navigate than you can in Navisworks. And obviously, the rendering capabilities in Twinmotion are far beyond what we can get from Navisworks. Just ends up being maybe a little bit less technical when it comes to the, not a little bit, probably a lot less technical when it comes to the timeliner. But in order to convey that visualization concept and communicate to stakeholders in the project, I was able to put in different entourage, like construction equipment, different workers. The scaffolding actually did come from Rich's Navisworks model that he put together. So the idea here is, better visualization, maybe not as much control, but there are many ways we can output this to get this to more of a, I'll call it, a consumer or executive level of understanding of what's happening within the project. Let me see, a couple of questions pop in, I'll address these. Does Twinmotion actually use for the construction sequence animation a real construction? So I believe this is Taijan Park asked this question. Is Twinmotion actually used for construction sequence animation? Yes, I mean, this construction timeline, I can say, if we did want to take the time, we can dial it down to the days. One thing Rich and I were playing around with for this presentation, or at least I was, Navisworks has that sort of transparency that turns on, that green transparency when the construction of an element starts, and then it shows full opacity when it is finished or completed. So at the beginning of the 5 days, it showed as green. When it was done, it showed as like a completed element like we're seeing on my screen here. I could have set that up in Twinmotion, just essentially duplicating the all of the assets so that there were two versions of both, and then overriding the materials for one of the copies, and then just triggering 5 days prior to it being finished, the start of it. So you could get that same look. To me, that seemed like a ton of additional work that I just personally just didn't really want to do or have the time to do. But if we wanted to convey the same idea and the same accuracy, it's possible, but it's going to take you probably, Rich mentioned, 3 weeks or 2 weeks to do all that data aggregation or all of the data conditioning that he was able to do from Assemble to Navisworks. If we were to then set this up in Twinmotion, you're probably talking an additional 2 to 3 weeks to set this timeline up. So possible, yes. Practical, probably not. Is there any import capability for phases in Twinmotion, Excel, CSV, MPP, etc.? Not currently. However, Twinmotion is built on the Unreal Engine, and we can definitely, in preparing for this presentation, Rich and I were kind of brainstorming ideas. There's a couple of things that I think that we could generate through some scripting, some light programming, in order to take that same information that Rich has from Assemble into the XML, feed that into the Unreal Engine, and create this type of sequencing. So maybe in a follow-up presentation in like 6 months or something, we'll have something that we can show that ties all of this together, and it's not like a manual rebuild.
I'll offer that there's a really extensive collection of construction elements like those concrete trucks. That's unreal stuff. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yeah, these are just assets that are available out of the box with Twinmotion. So they're doing a lot. They're adding a lot of additional assets constantly to this. So let me see if it's under. Oh, where did they put vehicles now? Did I? Objects. Oh, sorry. Vehicles. Oops. But before I get it, so yeah, there's a lot of different construction equipment, which I find is really nice because it does give you, you guys, this one here is from a Navisworks crane, and or boom arm, and the detail between this versus the concrete mixers, it's like night and day. But it just depends on what level of detail, what level of presentation do you want to show. We're getting pretty close to the end of the presentation here. I know we're at 150 right now. One thing I do want to show, I think I communicated how this setup, setting up in Navisworks. Those selection sets are key. We still need something like Navisworks to be able to break down the model into more granular detail than we're getting from Revit. So that, yes, it can be done through Assemble. It can be done in Navisworks. We just need something that gives us a little bit more control. And one of the example that I'm about to show you was an actual project that we did with a customer, Houseman Construction. We got permission that we could use their one of their examples. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys this in a real case study. What I did, the work it took to get to what we were trying to achieve, kind of the purpose behind it, what they were looking to get out of a presentation. So I think I have, I had this folder, I don't know. Well, let me start with this video. I had the folder open. Let's see if I go back into, all right, here is so working with Houseman Construction, they had a project, let me pause right here. They had a project that they were bidding to work on that was an existing building, old brick facade, and the project was a tear down of that brick facade and rebuilding essentially the entire skin of the building with a curtain wall system, including in between these two towers here, they call it the wedge, a whole new structural component that really links these two towers together. So they came to us to say it's hard to convey this concept to an owner, a stakeholder in the company without creating some type of visualization. So can we do this? And I think at first I was trying to attempt this in 3ds Max, and very quickly I said this is going to be weeks and weeks and weeks of work, where I believe I can get this done with Twinmotion and some construction timelining within Twinmotion, and was able to produce this video. The ask for their video was that it was like 1 minute, or right around 1 minute in length, but I was able to do this in Twinmotion, I think within a couple of days, maybe 16 or so hours of actual work, and then there were some meetings and stuff for feedback in between. So we were able to kick this out within a 4 to 5 day actual business day timeline. So to me, that's a really quick turnaround to create a nice video, presentable marketing video. So yeah, the video starts with kind of showing initially that there's structure being added for this wedge component between the two towers. And then just to meet that 1 minute, time frame, we kind of had to go quickly around this, but it's showing how this facade's being torn down in segments and then rebuilt up as curtain wall. There was a parking garage with the skin on the back, and then new cladding there. So all of this was done just to convey this message. Total runtime of this video was 1 minute. Had I slowed it down, maybe if we had 2 minutes, we would see a lot more of the detail of this. But using that same method of taking started with a Revit model. So they had the Revit model of the towers and the proposed curtain wall system that was being applied. We exported that to a Navisworks file, and I probably should have gotten Rich involved with this project because I could have really used his help. Probably would have, with Assemble, we probably would have been able to break those models down much quicker than I was able to with individually selecting elements via selection sets for creating those selection sets. But then each selection set, if I can scroll back to the beginning of, or one portion in this video here, and I can show you this in Twinmotion, what this ends up looking like. But kind of each little band of curtain wall was its own selection set. So just building these, ripping the facade down, and I think I did that by level. So I had different levels splitting the building, so we could kind of do that in ribbons. But tearing that down and then building the curtain wall up kind of simultaneously, each one of these being a different element, was a challenge, but it was something that I did manually, which, you know, was, like Rich said, clicking on elements at 3 in the morning, where if I had approached this maybe a little bit more methodically and thought about it rather than jumping right into it, maybe I would have been able to use Assemble and Rich's knowledge in Assemble to say, okay, let's break this curtain wall system down, and maybe we can get it into even more detail, you know, individual elements like mullions and curtain panels going in one at a time. But yeah, scrolling around, you can see the parking garage, different decks going in, different skin, animated video, which is cool. All the context that was pulled in, the site and everything. This is just pulled directly from Twinmotion. But yeah, they were pretty happy with the way that it came out, and I was too. I think it gave us a message we were trying to achieve, and I didn't have to spend a month working on it like I probably would have in 3ds Max trying to get this dialed in. So sure, there were some tricks pulled once we get to this point, kind of just filled in the entire curtain wall because this message was conveyed. This is how it was being torn down and rebuilt. We didn't have to do that through the entire building, although I could have, if we slowed that panning around, maybe we show that in more detail. But you know, don't want to make it a 5-minute video just showing the same thing over and over again.
Vince, can you speak to the ability to publish that?
Yeah. So let's see, we've got 4-ish minutes. So one of the capabilities in Twinmotion is we can create presentation models. We can basically package up this entire Twinmotion project and ship it off to someone else, either as an exe file that they can open on their own machine and view it like its own standalone application. It would have the construction timeline built into it that they would be able to scrub and see the different dates in a little bit more of a friendly user interface because they're not actually constructing it when they open that exe. The other option is to push this out to the cloud as a cloud presentation. We probably don't have enough time for me to show you or for that to load in the cloud, but let me show you here on our cloud page. I do have this one pushed up here. This is the presenter model that we were just seeing on my desktop in Twinmotion. If, let's see, let's let that load through a web application. So you can share this out via a URL. You could generate a QR code and have someone scan it on an iPad. It will get you to this web interface. You can view this stuff on different peripherals, so mobile or web. If you were able to share the exe, I do believe you can view that through virtual reality. If you have a headset tethered to a machine, you can look at it. But different ways of consuming the media to convey those ideas. So again, using this as a communication tool rather than a very rigid data-driven timeline is really the goal, I think, when we're playing with visualization tools. Whereas with what Rich was showing with that first option, you know, that is something that we can control more down to the detail. So, you know, it's just weighing what your goal is, what you're trying to show. here's this cloud presenter, our construction timeline might not look as good. You know, we have limitations going through a web browser, but what's really great about that is that this isn't really hitting my graphics card hard at all right now. This is running through the web browser, so you can do things like control that timeline. You are able to navigate around. I meant to throw that picture in here, Rich, like we talked about earlier today, but I didn't get to it. Let's see if we've got an old one in here. I think in our first presentation we put our pictures. I think Lori, you were even in here too, somewhere in this presentation model, but that must have been a different file. I think I put it right here. So yeah, anyway, that's kind of what we had to cover today. I think we're right at the end of the hour here.
So Rich and Vince, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you guys so much. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Be safe and have a great day, everyone. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.